There once was a jolly swagman camped by a billabong under the shade of a coolabah tree, and he sang...
Banjo Patterson's Waltzing Matilda tells the story of a striking shearer. He and his mates had burned down a wool shed on a sheep station in Queensland. Injustice had driven him to desperate lengths. There was a lot of injustice in Australia in the late 1800s, especially in the bush, the shearing sheds. How should I know? Well, this is the voice of David Temple, and I was there. It's 120 years to the day since William Spence and I united a ragtag bunch of shearing unions and non-union shearers to fight injustice in the bush. We established the Amalgamated Shearers Union, the union that grew to become the Australian Workers Union, today's AWU. It was the 16th of June 1886 at Fern's Hotel in Ballarat. Our union quickly grew to represent shearers across New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia. The Queensland Shearers Union formed in 1887. Old Spence and I firmly believed in social harmony and justice for the working man. Ballarat was a special place for us. It was the site of the Eureka Stockade. The spirit forged there under the Eureka flag was an inspiration to the early union movement, and I reckon it still might be today. Times have changed, but the history of the AWU would indicate that the things we believed in still ring true. It's a history that's been recorded in books, on films, in shearing sheds, on factory floors and building sites, in the Houses of Parliament, on the streets, in the media. It's a history of commitment, passion, mateship and shared ideals. A history of struggle, victory, sometimes disappointment. A history of special milestones. Back in 1891, Barcaldine in Queensland was the centre of the Great Shearers' Strike, an important watershed in the political history of Australia, commemorated to this day by a plaque on the famous Tree of Knowledge under which the striking shearers met. Banjo Patterson's Jolly Swagman could well have been there. The words on that plaque read, "Honour the men and women of the labour movement who congregated in this area and through their courage, determination and dedication to the principles, ideals and objectives of the labour movement played a lead role in the formation of the Labour Party and further spearheaded the many reforms that resulted in the vastly improved way of life for the Australian people generally." Wonderful words, wonderful spirit, born in the shearing sheds of Australia. By 1894, the Australian Workers' Union was formed and supported its members through the maritime strike, the pastoral strike, crippling depression and drought. The fledgling union struggled to survive, and early membership fell suddenly by 70%. Federation in 1901 brought a Commonwealth industrial relations system. The AWU was the first union to secure a federal award and ensure that workers, not just the bosses, had a say in setting pay rates and workplace conditions. By 1904, the AWU was the largest and wealthiest union in Australia, with 30,000 members. Our members did their bit in the First World War, when the Anzac tradition was born. The 1917 AWU annual convention was told that of just over 70,000 members, almost 30,000 were in uniform. At home, the AWU led the fight against conscription. After the Great War came the push for the one big union movement. Through amalgamations, the AWU moved closer to its goal of representing all Australian workers. During the 1930s, the black days of the Great Depression, the distraction and trauma of the federal labour split, the 40s were shaped by the Second World War. And again, the AWU was at odds with the government over conscription.
Some sunny day. August the 15th, 1945, and it's peace. Peace at last. And Sydney goes wild in various celebrations.
When our servicemen and women returned, there was great post-war industrial growth. Massive projects like the Snowy Mountain scheme. The unions had new battles with Pig Iron Bob. There was the shearers' strike of 1956.
We thought it was pretty unfair that we would have to lose money while the graziers were riding, you know, on a buoyancy that had never been heard of in the industry. So we decided to take some industrial action. There was a lot of bitterness and a lot of families, I mean, you know, split over it. And it was, you know, small towns like Longreach, Winton, Barcaldine, and Blackwall, they became very, very, you know, it was pretty sad really when you're seeing families that fought one another and neighbours that fought one another, and it wasn't a good period. From after that 56 strike right through till we had what was called the Wide Comb dispute, of literal, you know, peace in the industry, and it was well managed, and that was due mainly to the good management of the union.
Through the 60s and 70s came more struggles, like the Mount Isa dispute, the long and hard fight for equal pay for Aboriginal stockmen, more amalgamations, more growth, affiliation with the ACTU. In the 1980s, the emotions and conflicts of the Wide Comb dispute stained the decade. In 1993, the AWU amalgamated with the Federation of Industrial Manufacturing and Engineering Employees, itself an amalgamation of the Federated Iron Workers and the Australian Society of Engineers, a union as passionate and determined as the AWU, with an equally colourful history. The added strength ensured the AWU could support and protect its members through turmoil, like the failure of Ansett, the closure of the Newcastle Steelworks. We were able to defend our members against Exxon, the world's richest company, take on massive American corporations to make sure Aussie workers get a fair go, fight against John Howard's anti-worker and un-Australian legislation. And through it all, the AWU grew stronger and stronger to become the powerful force it is today. From the very early days, the voice of the AWU has been the Australian Worker magazine, In its early days, it was edited by the legendary Henry Boot. It continues to be one of the most important publications on the Australian political and social landscape. It's the AWU mouthpiece, the vehicle that takes the union's viewpoint, beliefs, principles and struggles to our members and the world. Henry Lawson was singer and prophet for the union in the early 1900s. He spread his prophecy through the pages of the Worker, a colourful character. But then the history of the AWU is full of colourful characters, like Donald MacDonald, Tom White, Clary Fallon, Tom Doherty, the FIA's Laurie Short, Gil Barr, the one and only Bill Ludwig, and of course, Bill Shorten.
It's fair to say I'm an optimist. I think the Australian Workers' Union's got a very bright future. 120 years is a great achievement. I mean, the whole of a sporting stadium will stand up and clap if someone can get to 100 runs, but accomplishing 120 years of continuous union representation, that's truly special. Members of the Australian Workers' Union have been involved in every part of Australian history, and it's great to be 120 years old.
It's the ordinary men and women of Australia who stand tall in the history of the AWU. They are the union. Their families, their aspirations, their hopes and dreams. Today there are 135,000 of them, ranging from hairdressers to rabbit trappers. They build railways, work in underground mines, work in agriculture, aviation, oil and gas, construction and steel. And after 120 years, the AWU is still with them, still fighting, still supporting, still determined to make this great country a better place for all.